God created the body to heal on an everyday basis.
Before we get started today, I wanted to say thank you to all of those who have donated to this channel. If you don't know, down below you can click the donate button to support the channel, and you can give a one-time or you can give monthly. If you're on Facebook, look up Faith and Failures. It's just like the podcast, and actually some of the podcast episodes are coming from people in this group. We're talking about real topics, answering and asking the hard questions. And that's the vision that I have for this podcast. The search for truth should not be something that you have to seek out alone. We're all in this together. We need to bring down the denominational divide and search for truth together. And right now, if you go to faithandfailures.com, you can see every episode that I put out every week. So check us out on YouTube at Faith and Failures. All right, let's get started. What's up, guys? Welcome back to Faith and Failures. Stephen Tillman here from faithandfailures.com. Today, I have with me a special guest, the author of Unleash Your God-Given Healing. Find on Amazon. Everything below that is mentioned of her stuff, her websites, everything will be cited down in the show notes below. If you're watching on YouTube, down in the description box. Very excited. We've been talking back and forth via email. And she has an incredible story that she is going to share with us today. Ginny, thank you so much for coming on and being willing to just share your story with the listeners.
Well, thank you. I am delighted to share what God has taught me, because I would like other people to learn from my school of hard knocks and not have to experience what I had to go through.
So now a little bit about your book, Unleash Your God-Given Healing, the 8 steps to prevent and survive cancer. So how long did you battle cancer, and your initial diagnosis, how did that affect you emotionally and spiritually?
Well, I have to tell you, in 2015, it was just 4 months after my mother died from breast cancer.
Oh, wow.
That shockingly, I was diagnosed. And when the doctor first told me that's a lump and it's cancer, I was in shock. Yeah. And the next week it's aggressive. And the next week it's like, oh, it looks like it's all over your body, and we're going to pull out every weapon of mass destruction to save your life. Well, nobody wants to hear that. And I was quite upset. And I rode that roller coaster of fear that most cancer patients ride. And then I had to look, and I just stopped and I said, Lord, did I do something to cause this? Everything has a reason. So I questioned my doctors, and they went over the 8 risk factors for the breast cancer I got, the aggressive breast cancer, and I didn't have one of them. So that was a shocker. So they did extensive genetic testing, and that showed nothing. And Stephen, I was sitting there going, well, I know there's a reason, and I'm not going to stop until I find it. And so that drove me to research for 2 reasons. I wanted to find out what caused my cancer. Was there something that I needed to change? What is God showing me here? And number 2, I wanted to discover what I could do as a cancer patient to help my doctors to beat my cancer. Because cancer is so much more than surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy, even though they had to bring all those out in order to save my life. Yeah. It was 6 years of treatment. I just ended in December, because 5 years of taking a pill that would shut down all estrogen production in my body, because estrogen drove the cancer. I had an entire year of chemotherapy, the worst of the worst of the worst. And I had 3 surgeries in 1 year. So it was quite an ordeal. And the more I researched, the more I kept saying, people don't need to go through this. People need to learn from what I've learned in pulling back the curtain on cancer and its causes. And I was able to discover several things that I did that I should have done differently, that I now do differently. Because if you don't want that cancer coming back, if you don't change any of your lifestyle habits, with all they've had to put your body through, chances are it will come back.
So the whole process of it, not only is it, so it was a lifestyle issue.
For me, it was definitely a lifestyle issue. I mean, when they give you all those genetic tests and not one of them shows you have a genetic factor, you can't blame it on genetics.
Yeah. Wow.
So and the normal risk factors, I didn't have those. And so it left me with discovering things that I didn't know before about how the body works and things I was doing that was suppressing my immune system rather than allowing it to work as God intended.
So now, did you have any sort of medical background, or this was all fueled from this experience and you just dove head first and you're like, listen, I'm gonna beat this thing. I'm gonna solve these problems that I'm seeing.
I've always been interested in health and wellness, and I have spoken on the topic and done a lot of research in it. But it started when my dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and my mom and my sister and I served as his caregiver for about 8 to 9 years.
Wow.
That's what got the ball rolling. I kept saying, how can this happen to a brilliant man and him go from being absolutely brilliant and doing mission work all over the world to not even knowing who he was or who we were or what he did in life? And so that was what got the ball rolling. I started to attend conferences, medical conference with the top Alzheimer's and cancer research doctors. And so I began to learn that Alzheimer's and cancer were both what these scientists and researchers were saying. They're basically lifestyle diseases with a small amount of genetic component. That's only like 15% genetics.
Really?
So as I was realizing that, I was like, okay, so it's not just all decided by genetics. So that's what got the ball rolling.
So both of those are lifestyle. A large percent, like majority percentage of those are both lifestyle issues.
Amen. And people need to realize that. And when you talk about COVID-19, these secondary factors that people are getting that are putting them in danger and their life in danger, these things are a lot of them have comorbidities that are making this manifest in a more negative way because of lifestyle.
So a lot of these things that control and have controlled and dominated people's lives is just simple. I'm using simple loosely, but a lifestyle issue.
By and large, more lifestyle.
Wow.
I was talking to a famous cancer research center about 6 months ago, and they said, Mrs. Brant, yes, we are discovering that we thought it was mainly genetic for many years. Only 10 to 15% of cancer is actually genetic. It's mainly lifestyle. And if you look at MD Anderson, they're starting to say it. The American Cancer Society is starting to say it. It's starting to be what I discovered during my journey is now starting to be everywhere you look.
What were the different levels, I guess, and how deep did you go in your research? Like this, obviously having cancer brought you to this point and kind of a breaking point. You've always been interested, but you were like, you know what? Now I really need to dig deep. Like what kind of research did you discover along the way in your journey?
Well, I had to survive. I kept hearing the word death. Every time I turned around, I was signing papers saying side effects, including damage to your brain, your heart, your lungs, and death. And so I was trying to figure out how to live. I read about 50 books by scientists and oncologists and medical doctors. I combed through the medical research. And what people don't realize is the research is just phenomenal as to how much lifestyle affects our health. And like I say, I just didn't know that there are fruits and vegetables designed by God that actually prevent cancer.
Really?
And
Like
was I eating those? No, I am now.
Just to name a few, what would be some of those in your research that you found?
Blueberries. Wild blueberries are good for your heart and your lungs and your eyes and so many things. They build your immune system, but they have anti-cancer properties.
Really?
That's the way God made a blueberry. And so it's actually, to be perfectly honest, Stephen, every fruit, vegetable, nut, seed, and herb helps prevent cancer. But there are some that are just top of the top. And so every day in my smoothie that I drink, I get a cup of blueberries. I also get cruciferous vegetables, the broccoli, the cauliflower, the kale, the Brussels sprouts and broccoli sprouts. These things are loaded with sulforaphane, and sulforaphane helps with the estrogenic cancers, but with all cancers. And if you look back, the American Cancer Society started talking about this in 1985, but most people don't know that one of the best ways to prevent getting cancer is to eat these cruciferous vegetables.
Well, where has all this, like, why is this not rose to the top of research and public knowledge? Like, has it been suppressed by people trying to make money? Or is it just people don't care because it would have to be
I
such a
think
lifestyle?
people just want to show up at their doctor's office, and I've been guilty of this.
Yeah.
Doctor, fix my cancer. Doctor, fix my heart disease. Doctor, fix my high blood pressure. Doctor, doctor, doctor. Doctor, fix everything. Give me a pill, give me a surgery, give me this, give me that. They don't want to change their lifestyle. Most Americans, and I hate to say it, most Christians, and you look back at the Bible, God tells us in Genesis, I have given you these nuts, seeds, fruits, vegetables, and herbs to eat. And then later we find that science can now show that the chemicals in these fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds have phytochemicals and antioxidants that promote healing in our bodies. So God created them from the very beginning with a certain plant profile that enhances our own DNA and our immune system. And I just totally miss that. But if you look back in Genesis and you look at Daniel and what he said, I will not eat the king's food. I will have fruit, vegetables, these plant type, seed type plants, and water. And who fared better?
It's almost like God knew what he was doing when he created it, right?
Absolutely.
Go
And
figure.
we think as Americans and as Christian Americans that we can just eat food and stuff our faces and not give concern as to what we eat. And now, and I call it in my chapters on nutrition, I have 3 chapters, I call it using food as medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And I now eat in a whole different light. And I don't sit there and eat foods all day long that I don't like. I figure out how to find the foods that are healthy that I like. And I have completely changed from junk food queen in high school that ate everything junky, fried, starchy, sweet,
Yeah.
everything in the book. And I eat in a whole different light today, but it took me a while to get there.
So in this, besides the chemo and these lifestyle changes, you started digging, started researching, started realizing, hey, there's something more to this. Like, what were your doctors saying when you decided to make these kind of changes?
They were very supportive. By and large, I went to a cancer center that provided a nutritionist on my case and a naturopathic doctor as part of my cancer care because they believed that fighting cancer was more than just the chemo, the surgery, and the radiation. But what was amazing to them was that I went beyond what they were telling me and researched further and shared with them things that I was learning that made a difference in my cancer journey, and they had to agree. One of the things is no one ever told me to exercise during all the cancer treatments.
Really?
But I did it because of stress. Exercise is my way of dealing with stress. And so from the first moments I was diagnosed, my husband and I walked around the neighborhood as we prayed and we tried to contemplate which direction did God want us to go. And when I had my first surgery, I wanted to get the catheter out. So I asked the nurse, what can I do to get this catheter out? I have so many tubes attached to my body, I don't know what to do with them. And the nurse said, if you can walk 4 rounds of the hospital floor by 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, I'll remove the catheter. Well, I got up that morning and I walked 2 miles on the hospital floor, dragging my poles and tubes behind me. And when I got back to the room, the nurses were cheering me on. And my surgeon came in and my respiratory therapist came in and they said, you don't believe what you've just done for your body. You promoted healing. You pumped out the anesthesia. You've reduced your risk of blood clots. And you're supposed to go home with breast cancer with all these tubes for several weeks. And they said, we've not done this before, but we're removing all the tubes. Your body through the exercise has taken care of it.
Wow.
So I took the same approach with chemotherapy. They said, you're going to have 8 hours of chemicals going through your body. This is the worst chemo known to mankind. And I walked 2 miles before and 2 miles afterwards. My doctors did not tell me to do that. But at the end of the chemotherapy, when my blood work came out within normal limits within 6 weeks, and it normally takes 2 to 5 years to recover from what that chemo does to your body, my doctors looked at me and they said, we've just not seen anything like this before. And you act as if you haven't had chemo and you had the worst of the worst of the worst. A few years later, they said, did you see the new research in Australia? And I said, why, no. They said it's showing that the best thing a cancer patient can do is exercise before and after chemo, before and after surgery, and while you're going through radiation and all the different things and medications that I had to take over 5 years. Wow. They said because you're building back your bone density while the medication is taking it down. But exercise should be used by cancer patients as part of their treatment. So what I did to relieve stress was so much more than that. And now the research backs up what I did, but that's not why I did it. I didn't know that it was enhancing my body to make use of the chemo to kill the cancer cells and then move them out of my body. What happens with chemo is people go into sepsis and die because your liver and your kidneys get overloaded. But when you are constantly pumping that lymphatic system with exercise, it's the only system in your body that only moves and works when you move. And so when you do that, you're pumping those toxins right out of your body, which is where they need to go.
Now we touched a little bit on it earlier, but in this whole process, you talked about the immune system and exercising and your body healing itself. And I saw on christianpost.com that you also kind of opened that doorway a little bit, talking about COVID-19 and how do those two overlap in your research? What did you find?
They overlap in every way. The same 8 steps would help you prevent cancer or get through the journey or prevent it from coming back. It would prevent Alzheimer's, heart disease, and COVID is all about your immune system. It is very contagious, but if you followed CDC guidelines and lessened your exposure, okay, and then you built up your immune system in addition, then you would fare better. If you caught it, you wouldn't go through as much. You wouldn't have these horrible, horrific side effects, by and large, that most people are having. For example, if you hydrate properly, your immune system and every cell in your body is going to work as God intended. But if you dehydrate, if you allow your body to be dehydrated, your immune system's not going to work well. So if your immune system is low, if it's suppressed, and you start drinking the proper amount of water and drinking the right things that superhydrate, your immune system's going to start going up immediately. So that same 8 steps in the book of hydration, exercise, when you exercise, your B and T cells go up. And during COVID, what did most people do? They ate potato chips and hibernated in their cave.
Yeah.
My husband and I never did that. We walked 2 to 3 miles a day. We stayed away from people. We quarantined. But if we had to walk around our house 25 times to get in the exercise or around the neighborhood and stay away from people, either way, you've got to keep moving. It's important for your immune system.
Yeah, the exposure thing, like we were wearing masks, hand sanitizer stuff. And I travel a lot for a living, working as a real estate photographer. And my wife ended up getting COVID. And she felt, it wasn't like she was sick, but it was like a allergy stuff. But we work out all the time. We always are drinking water, staying hydrated. And we never during the COVID, the height of last year, we were all, and I actually made it, and I don't know why, but just because I had a little more time on my hands because things slowed down a little bit, I was exercising more than I normally was. And when she got it, even though I was around her, I never got it, or I didn't test positive for it anyways.
That's amazing, because if a spouse gets it, usually you're going to get it too.
That's what my wife says. She said, there ain't no way. I said, maybe the test was wrong, which is positive. Which is possible. It was just.
But it is possible that if you were doing the right things, you're not going to be as likely to get it. I'm not saying you won't get it, because it is so contagious that anybody can get it.
Yeah, anybody. And you see through the data that it's overweight people. There's certain genres of things, everything you're talking about, that people have severely had issues or died from. A lot of that, or I venture to say 95% of it is exactly what you're talking about. They're sloths. They don't exercise. They don't eat right. They, all the crap they can. And it's like, it just overtakes their system because they can't fight it off.
And Stephen, when you sleep at night, a major hormone is released in deep sleep called melatonin. So if you were exposed to COVID and then you sleep at night, or let's say you have cancer cells in your body, that's when your body's going to go to work and take care of business. Upping your immune system, major cancer fighter as well. But again, you want your immune system high if you're going to fight cancer or COVID or anything.
Yeah. So in this whole process, this whole journey, like this is kind of the main question in this Christian podcast, but like, how did your faith waver? Like, what did it do to you spiritually to go through this? I mean, you said you asked a lot of questions in the beginning. Like, address that? Like, what did you have to fight against?
Grieving the death of my mother. The last parent had died, and for 15 years, my husband and I and sister had taken care of all these parents. And so I was still in a state of grief. But when I started to realize that my emotions could impact my immune system, and that might, again, have something to do with why I had cancer. I'd been a caretaker on top of a full-time job for 15 years with all 4 parents. And so you're like that rat on the wheel. And when I started realizing and seeing the research that showed that your emotions, the positive emotions, can actually enhance your immune system, and grief and all these negative emotions can suppress your immune system. Yeah. Well, I could look, and the research on grief was overwhelming. And I said, oh my goodness, this is what grief did to my body. It enabled my immune system to be suppressed and not work as God intended. And so I had to realize I had to quit, living on the roller coaster ride of fear and worry and all these things. And I looked at Philippians 4:6-8. And Paul's telling you in the trials of your life, and he was in the middle of them, what do? You pray about everything, you give thanks in everything, and you let your mind meditate on his word through prayer and on all the good things that are happening in the midst of the trial. Because if you put your eyes on all the negative things, I could have gone totally under.
Yeah.
So I learned how to manage my faith in a different way, because I realized it affected my health and how well I was going to do. When you laugh, you're promoting healing. I mean, I came up with cancer jokes, so many fun things happen when you're in the cancer journey, like shopping with my husband for a do-rag because I lost every hair on my head. I said, I never thought I'd be doing this. And we just died laughing in the wig shop. And the poor lady checking me out, she didn't know how to take me, but you have to laugh. Laughter promotes healing in the body. Having hope promotes healing in the body. So I'm trying to give my doctor the best terrain to work on, including my faith and my emotions.
That's powerful. Yeah, perspective changes everything. If you can get in the right mindset, it doesn't matter where you are. You can be hopeful and full of joy.
Well, I had to look at it this way too, Stephen, that I realized this cancer, I heard the word death so many times. I realized it might be my ticket to heaven. Okay. And so I just had to leave that in God's hands. I was going to do everything I could to promote healing. And if it was my ticket to heaven, then I was going to glorify him as I went.
Yeah.
And that's the role of the Christian, because for some people, their illness, their cancer, their COVID is their ticket to heaven. And so, you're blessing your children and your grandchildren. I was prepared to do that if I saw I wasn't going to make it, because I was going to go to, you have to have that eternal perspective.
Absolutely.
And only Christians have that.
Yeah.
So Christians can fare better during the cancer journey because they know, well, if all else fails, I go to heaven.
Yeah, win either way.
That's right.
So what are some of the
way you have to look at it?
So what are some of the risk factors for getting breast cancer? You mentioned that earlier about the risk factors
yeah, well, let me tell you this. The number one risk factor for all cancers is obesity.
Really?
And I told you I didn't have any of the risk factors, but I did eventually find some risk factors that I did have. The sedentary lifestyle would be secondary to that, and then smoking and drinking. And so the first 4, I didn't have at all. But when you get into breast cancer, taking hormones, not breastfeeding. I breastfed even twins up to 2 years old. But taking these estrogen hormones and these estrogenic chemicals that we're lathering our bodies with. That's what was found at high levels in my body. It was not listed by the American Cancer Society as a risk factor, but they are now starting to mention that these xenoestrogens, they are estrogens that are chemical-like, that are coming from the outside into our body through our skin and what we eat and what we drink, that these things may be influencing our estrogen levels.
Wow. So
We now have men getting breast cancer, and 90% of those men that get breast cancer are estrogenically fed. And you go, but God didn't make men to have high levels of estrogen chemicals. It makes no sense.
So are there specific,
go, okay, it's what we're putting on our skin.
Are there specific foods that are really high in this, or where's all this coming from?
Chemicals that they put on the foods. I went so far as to have my body tested because I kept saying, I know something's wrong and I've got to find out what it is, because if I don't change it, this cancer is going to come back.
Yeah.
And what they found in my body was high levels of glyphosate, an Agent Orange pesticide, coming in through my foods. And I was eating reasonably healthy, but I was not eating organic. And so I found that my body needs to eat organic as much as possible, because those chemicals build up in my body. But I have to be honest with you, they did not build up in my husband's body. I had him tested as well. I'm like, okay, we're two pigs eating out of the same trough in the same pig pen. Well, his levels must be high too. They were not. God has given us 5 filtering systems to get things like this out of our body, and his filtering systems were working pretty well. Mine were not.
So is there something specific to eat or drink or whatever to keep those filtering well? Or is it like, how can you make an entire life change? Like, how did you do that? Like, was it difficult?
Exercise, strengthens your liver and in all of your systems in your body. So exercise is important. Lemon is good for the liver. Fresh lemon is good for the liver. I start off every day with warm lemon water with apple cider vinegar that stimulates the liver function. I had to buy a sauna because at the end of my chemotherapy, my levels of chemicals in my body were out of the wazoo. Yeah. And when your chemical load is that high, then your immune system is going to continue to be suppressed. So I started sweating out the toxins. My husband can get in the sauna in 10 minutes. He's in a hard sweat. It takes me 30 minutes before my body even starts to sweat. So here we're seeing a difference in his body and my body. He sweats easier. He doesn't have as many toxins in his body built up. So I have to get in the sauna more, So the sauna is a great way to get your toxic load down. But another way is to simply not lather up your body with all these chemical things. I make my own lotions and things with essential oils and coconut oil. I mean, one of the best things you can put on your skin is coconut oil, no chemicals. So you start reading labels, and my book goes into great detail of things you can simply swap out, and the chemicals will not be as many in your system if you stop using things, personal care products, cleaning products. I used lifelong that were filled with chemicals and estrogen mimicking hormones.
Wow. That's an eye opener right there. Cause I mean, it really, you don't realize what we touch, eat, drink until you really start breaking it down and looking into it.
That's right. And another thing that I learned, and this has to do with COVID too, is that 70 to 80% of your immune cells are in your gut lining. And so if your gut is healthy, and let's just say that a COVID germ touched your hand and went down in your mouth and into your gut, that gut lining is designed to attack and defend. Yeah. So probably my husband and I had been exposed to COVID. We've been on airplanes. We've been traveling. We've been going and doing, especially with this book coming out, and doing interviews across the Southeast. And, if that gut lining, now years ago, couldn't have said this. I eat probiotic foods. I eat foods that are good for the gut. I go into detail about what foods are really good for the gut. And I stopped with the foods that cause the gut lining to end up getting tears and leaks in it. And when that gut lining is strong, your immune system is strong. So your gut is designed to even, help with the colds and flus and the COVIDs of this world. Now, if you get overexposed, just be prepared. You're going to get COVID.
Yeah. Now, is there anything specific that you give that helps with that gut health?
Well, there are things like onions and bananas and all the fruits and vegetables and fermented. Now, I don't personally like fermented foods. I just don't die over them, but I hide them in my smoothie. If there's something I don't like, the banana and chocolate and blueberry in the smoothie will cover it up. And when you eat all those greens and kale and all that kind of stuff, it's good for your gut lining. So fruits and vegetables, herbs, nuts, and seeds are all anti-cancer, and they feed the gut lining. It is the fiber from the fruits and vegetables, nuts, and seeds that feeds the good bacteria. So you've got to have the good bacteria, and you've got to have a lot of fiber to feed it. So I follow Dr. Jordan Rubin's, he was very, very sick and almost died and completely turned his health around by fixing his gut. I follow his advice where I eat 3 probiotic foods a day and about 10 to 12 fruits and vegetables, nuts, and seeds a day.
So what would be some probiotic foods that would be on that list? Like, do you have a lot of options, or are there just certain ones that are really rich for that?
Yogurt is definitely one of those, but I use coconut yogurt.
Now, is that plain yogurt, or is that like?
Oh yes, plain. I don't put any sugar in my. Sugar can suppress your immune system. Too much sugar.
Yeah.
If your blood sugar is too high or too low, both can compromise your immune system. So I try to keep it within certain ranges just for that reason. But I also use that apple cider vinegar drink. Apple cider vinegar is a probiotic.
I drink that almost every day, and I didn't know.
Yeah. It's a great thing. And then you've got the fermented vegetables. Costco has them. A jar this big that'll last me several months, and I just pop it in my smoothie because I don't really like to eat it. Yeah. So if I can hide it in a smoothie, there's several things I'll hide in that smoothie that I would never personally eat, like sprouts. Broccoli sprouts are probably the vegetable that are highest in immune building and cancer fighting, but I don't like to eat them. So I hide them, and I don't tell my husband what I put in there.
So can you explain one of your steps and how you use it on your cancer journey?
Well, let me just say that sleep is free. A lot of the things I talk about in my book are just totally free. But I used to take it for granted, and I would do things like fly cross country to speak somewhere and then show up, at my school to teach the next morning by taking the red eye special. I do not do that anymore. Yeah. Because when you disrupt that sleep cycle, your immune system starts to go down. And so when you realize that your brain and your body and your immune system detoxes and heals in deep sleep, and that hormone called melatonin goes off, it's a major cancer fighter. They now have research that shows if you're sleep deprived, your cancer cells can multiply.
Wow.
So your reason for getting sick can be related to not getting consistent deep sleep.
It does change everything. Like, there's nothing like a good night's rest and you wake up and you feel good and you're ready to go. It does make a big, huge difference.
And we think we can get more done if we cut into sleep. And that's not the way God made our body. He made our body to work under what we call the circadian rhythm, where once the sun goes down, your body automatically starts to fall to sleep and it wakes up to the sun the next morning.
That's so cool.
That's called circadian rhythm. It's called a circadian rhythm. It's just the way that our body was made. And all the sleep experts I studied under all talked about the importance of that biological clock and that circadian rhythm. So much that people that do work at night on third shift,
Mm-hmm.
They have to call it a hazard for cancer and sickness
Wow.
because a lot of people's body cannot adjust. You're not meant to sleep during the day. You're meant to sleep when the sun goes down. So the people that do these third shift, unless they're young, their body doesn't usually handle it as well.
I was in my early 20s. I was working at a Walmart warehouse here in East Texas. And when I started, I was on that third shift and I was working through the nights, and I was young, and I went home, covered up my windows, and it was not the same. I never felt like I got enough sleep. It wasn't right. Like my body was fighting against it so hard because, you do your entire life the right way, and then you try to switch it up because you have to.
Right.
And
And that's your circadian rhythm speaking.
yeah, it was speaking hard too. I never felt rested. And I had to do that for an entire year before I could switch and get hired on at another shift. And it was terrible. I never experienced it. A constant being tired and always just like, it was like I was in a constant fog all the time.
Try doing that older too. That would work out very well. You're better off younger trying to do that. But when you just look at sleep and hydration, two perfectly free things, and exercise is free. And now when you get to food, if you eat right, it's going to cost you a little more.
Yeah.
Because grass-fed beef is going to be better for you, but it's going to cost more than just, grain-fed beef. And, when you eat fruits and a lot of fruits and vegetables, it's going to cost you more, but I believe it's worth it because it complements our DNA, and that's the way God made our bodies to thrive. I mean, it's just amazing to me, Stephen, that in his infinite wisdom, he can heal us in a moment. Mm-hmm. Because he is God and he is King. But he also made our bodies to perform healing acts all during the day while we're just doing this interview and not even thinking about it.
Yeah.
But it intensifies at night, and it works as he intended when we sleep, when we move during the day, when we eat plants. And if there's one thing I've learned from this cancer journey, I've heard almost every doctor in the book, every research scientist, all the top dogs say the same thing. You want to be healthy, eat more plants. They're not saying you have to eat all plants and that you can't have meat and you can't have eggs. But what they're saying is the more plants you eat, the less problems you're going to have.
Yeah. So from your book, Unleash Your God-Given Healing, 8 Steps to Prevent and Survive Cancer. Of all this new knowledge that you've taken in, this research that you've done, what is one thing that, if anybody is listening to this now, one thing that you want them to walk away from and leave them with that will help them, that will challenge them, but something that you learned firsthand?
That God created the body to heal on an everyday basis. And science proves more every day that there are all these self-healing mechanisms in our body, but we need to get out of the way and stop doing things that suppress the way God made our body.
That's a tough one.
Well, it sounds like you're already doing something, just a lot of these naturally. But when you go through the book from cover to cover, there's no way you can't learn new things because a lot of people don't know this information and they don't understand how the immune system was created by God to work. It is intricate. It is miraculous. Yeah. And, today people can regenerate brain cells. I mean, this crazy. They used to not think that they could, and they're finding, yes, they can.
Yeah.
So but if you eat junk food, as I used to do all the time, if you do certain things, you're going to make it harder for that body to work as God intended.
Yeah. Highly agree. Highly recommend Unleash Your God-Given Healing, 8 Steps to Prevent and Survive Cancer, written by Ginny Dent Brant. Thank you so much for coming on tonight. And you can check her book out at Amazon.com. Find her, get her book, read it cover to cover, and live by these principles and these things that God has given us that we can restore our body on a daily basis. It may be hard to do and maybe a little more pricey, but it's not worth the cost if you don't do it.
That's right. And let me say this, I do have a cancer prevention and wellness blog they can sign up for at www.ginnybrant.com. The doctor who wrote the book with me and wrote commentary throughout, he was a famous oncologist and medical researcher, died about a month ago from COVID. He was 84 years old, still treating cancer patients full time and doing medical research. But I mean, he was just a gift to the cancer world and doing so many things to help people with illnesses. And he and I saw eye to eye on it, that it's more than chemo, radiation, and surgery.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That the patient plays a very important part in their own recovery.
Well, Ginny, thank you so much for coming on tonight and taking your time out of your busy schedule. So excited and so thankful for your story. It is a blessing, an honor, and a privilege just to have you on here.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.